The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch, copyright 2016 EMP 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 3, The Sad Seeker. Far away in the west, across the Middle Sea, in the Kingdom of Liberty, a man named Cursoon camped upon the borders of the black bog of Myrmerk. The shadowed outline of the bog's thick, tangled trees loomed over him and his campsite, like the raised hackles of some enormous beast. Like livid, he sat gazing into his own small campfire, and its flickering light glinted in his blue eyes. Absorbed in thought, his thick brown eyebrows were frozen in a troubled scowl. He was in his mid-30s, and the strands of gray hair in his sideburns betrayed this fact. A short beard covered his face, and long, sandy brown hair hung down to the middle of his back in way-worn tangles. Upon his head, he wore a hat that was dyed with the 12 colors, and as these colors progressed across the hat, they mixed one into the next, like those of a rainbow. It was safe to say that in all of Riven, there was no hat like his. The rest of Cursoon's attire was common enough. He wore a pale blue tunic that hung down near his knees, and under this, a loose pair of maroon trousers. Over his pants, he was clad in leather leggings that covered him from the middle of his thighs to his ankles, and the common sandals of liberty were strapped upon his feet. Draped over his shoulders, he wore what looked like a black cloak in the half-light of the early dawn. However, it was actually dark blue in color, and its richly textured cloth matched wholly with his somber expression. Cursoon had been away from his home for nearly 6 months, and a gloomy mood hung about him like clouds of thick black smoke. He seemed to be a miserable person, and the direct cause of his misery was the very thing for which he so diligently searched. Unconsciously, he twisted a golden ring round his finger as he thought of her. It was made after the fashion of the barbarian peoples, being wrought of yellow gold with a braided band of white gold around its middle. The ring was his wedding band and had been given to him by his wife. Besides it, he wore no other jewelry upon his person. As Cursoon gazed at the back of his hand and the ring that embraced his finger, a new memory abruptly crowded its way into his mind. He envisioned his slightly tanner hand contrasted against his wife's fair skin as he caressed her smooth, shapely back. Though he was not extremely dark, he was browner than her, for she was born of the northern barbarian race. The thought of his wife forced his eyes back to the darkness of the bog that lay just beyond his campsite. As Cursoon peered into the darker shadows of its trees, a feeling of dread crept back into his heart. It was indeed the darkest place in all of Liberty.
Would she really go into such an evil-looking wood?
He whispered to himself. He was still eyeing the swamp when a sudden sound caused him to jump. His hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword as he leapt up and spun around in one fluid movement to see who or what was upon him.
"Pardon, sir, I didn't mean to startle you."
A young man quickly stammered, seeing that Cursoon had grabbed for his weapon.
"Where'd you come from?"
Cursoon asked with an irritated tone in his voice. He was trying to hide the fearful look that had been so clearly expressed upon his face. The stranger took off his straw hat and scratched the thick mat of reddish curls that had been hidden beneath. He seemed to be searching for just the right words. After a moment, he slowly answered,
"Well, again, begging your pardon, sir, but, I come at my wife's insistence. She's sore vexed over the fact that a vagabond has made camp on our land. I mean, no disrespect, but, she's away there even now, watching to make certain I dismiss you right proper."
He gestured over his shoulder. Cursoon leaned back to look around the farmer, and, sure enough, there was a small farmhouse just behind him. It was a quaint little cottage with a barn and a short stone wall set around them both. A wisp of smoke wafted up from the house's chimney, which poked up out of the center of its round, straw-thatched roof. The door of the cottage stood open, and the silhouette of a plump young woman was set against the glow of the hearth from within the house. The woman stood with her hands placed impatiently upon her round hips. Her long shadow stretched out before her, and it almost seemed to loom over the two men. Cursoon straightened and looked at the young farmer with raised eyebrows while trying not to smile at the man's obvious dilemma.
"Ah, now I see your mission quite clearly,"
he said with a slightly humorous tone, but as he added his next words, he became more sincere.
"Please forgive my trespass. I made camp long after dusk and didn't see your house, nor did I know that anyone owned this land."
Well then, no harm done, sir,
the red-headed man remarked stiffly, while nervously rubbing his freckled cheek with the back of his hand. There was a minute of awkward silence, and in that moment, the farmer took note that the other man's hand still rested upon the hilt of his sword.
That's a fine blade you have there, sir.
The younger man stammered timidly. He could clearly see that the weapon was expensively made, and it began to occur to the fretful farmer that this man might be someone of significance. Cursoon unsheathed the sword and held it out.
"It belongs to my father's house. In fact, it was given to my grandfather by good King Leal himself,"
Cursoon explained.
"He named it Fortuity."
The weapon was indeed richly crafted. Its pommel was sculpted to look like a golden four-leaved shamrock, and both tips of its crossguard were decorated with matching three-leafed clovers. The grip was covered in a rich blue felt, over which golden wire was twisted. Its golden rain-guard was shaped like a chevron, and just beyond its hilt, the words "Ever Troth" were inlaid in gold upon its blade. The farmer's hazel eyes shifted to the man's shield, which leaned against a nearby tree. It was emblazoned with 3 golden shamrocks around a golden chevron upon a field of royal blue. The 2 above the chevron were 3-leaved, and the one below had 4. The fact that the traveler's shield and sword matched made the red-headed man feel ill. The odds were slim that a mere vagabond would own a matching set of weapons.
May I ask, sir, to what house you belong?
The young man asked haltingly.
"I am Cursoon, son of Acumen, the Lord of Eagle's Peak,"
the way-worn traveler replied, while removing his hat and tilting his head toward the other man. By this declaration, the young farmer was now sure that this was the son of a nobleman, and though he had never heard of him or his father, he was beginning to regret ever coming out of his house. Hoping to seem a little more friendly, he decided to introduce himself as well.
My name is, Guileless. Guileless, the son of old Chaffer. He's a freeman and a farmer also. He lives away there in the neighbouring meadow, and it was he that gave me this parcel as a wedding present so my new wife and I would have a home. You see, we were just married a month ago and we mean to raise a family in this small glen.
Guileless had a habit of speaking rapidly and telling all he knew when he was unnerved. He continued,
I've always loved this plot of land, even back when I was but knee-high to a gnome. There's the river for swimming and the old oaks for climbing. It's the closest thing to paradise so far as a boy can tell. I'd say it's perfect, if it weren't for that awful bog being such an eyesore and, what's more, a terrible offence to the nose. But then we only smell the reek when the wind blows wrong.
"Well met, Farmer Guileless, son of Chaffer."
Cursoon smiled and reached out in a gesture of friendship. Guileless glanced at the other man's hand without understanding. Though liberty was, by definition, more free, it was still uncommon for a lord or lordling to shake the hand of a peasant or even a freeman. Seeing his confusion, Cursoon laughed, took his hand, and then shook it firmly. In response, the young farmer smiled nervously. He was sure his own hand felt like a limp fish. Guileless had not liked confronting the stranger when he thought he was just a simple vagabond, but now that he knew he was the son of a lord, he was quite beside himself.
Well met, my lord.
There was another moment of awkward silence, and then Cursoon cleared his throat.
"So, you don't much like our black bog, huh?"
The farmer shook his head without speaking for the first time.
"Well,"
Cursoon sighed.
"it just so happens that's exactly where I'm headed."
He shot a darkened glance at the foul forest. Guileless shuddered.
Sir, your business is your own, but if I were you, I wouldn't dare to go into that evil place.
I have little choice.
The traveler replied gloomily.
I'm searching for my family, and in all of Liberty, this is the one place where I haven't looked. She's of the barbarian race, and above all else, they value valor in war and high adventure. It may very well be that she's entered that vile swamp, seeking both and taken my sons along with her.
How's it that you came to be married to one of those grey eyes?
The young farmer pondered aloud without thinking of how the question sounded. Upon hearing his own words, he was immediately sorry.
I meant no disrespect.